Hello everyone, Eric Chappelle, Civil Community Evangelist for Autodesk, and with me today is John Sayre, Technical Marketing Manager, also for Autodesk. And John's going to be the star of the show today, talking about dynamic grading in Civil 3D. So really looking forward to seeing his presentation on that. Before we get there, though, I do want to talk to you for just a moment about our webcast series in our community. This is something we've been doing for a little over 2 years now. And we try to do this twice a month, usually on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. We're a little off schedule this month, but that's cool. And the goal is to inform you about our civil products, about features and developments and things that are going on with the products, usually from the perspective of the product team, but every once in a while we'll have a special guest from a different part of the company, and today is the case with John. John's my colleague on the marketing team, and he's going to be sharing, although what he's sharing is quite technical. I wouldn't call it marketing at all. We all, have to keep up our expertise in the products, and this is something that that John's known for being good with. So, like I said, we're going to get some great insights from him today. But the goal overall is to just bring you guys, the users of our products, a little closer to the folks making the products. And of course, we encourage feedback and questions as we go, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. Our next webcast, just so you know, will be in 2 weeks. It's Wednesday, August 23rd, same time. Our presenter will be Peter Ingalls, and he's going to talk about rail design with our products, specifically InfraWorks and Civil 3D. So rail is definitely becoming more and more popular with our customers and in the world in general. So I'm sure this is going to be timely and very informative and important. If you have any ideas for webcast topics that you'd like to see in the future, please let us know, and you can do so by just simply typing in your ideas right in the questions panel in your GoToWebinar interface. If you don't have any ideas right now, but one pops in later in the webcast, just feel free to enter at any time, enter those in. We keep a log of the questions for each webcast, so when we're trying to plan out our webcast schedule for the coming months and years, we'll look back on those and see what kinds of topics you guys have suggested. So any input you have there is greatly appreciated. I've got a couple of polls that I'm going to show you guys that I appreciate you participating in. The first one is, we want to know a little bit about how many people in your company or organization use InfraWorks. So let us know where you're at as far as the usage level within your company or organization. Is it nobody? Is it one person, 2 to 5, 6 to 10, or more than 10? And I'll give you guys a little bit of time to respond, and then I'll share the results. So far, about 60% of you have voted, so let's just give it about another 5 seconds. And then I'll close the poll and share the results with you. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. And it looks like 34% of you have no InfraWorks users in your company or organization. That's actually good news because you're here to learn about it and see what it can do. Although John's going to be talking about Civil 3D primarily today, it's good to know that you're part of the webcast series. 23% had 1, another 23% had 2 to 5, 12% had more than 10. All right, let's do another one. We're interested in hearing what you think about InfraWorks today, so it's going to be all about that. In your opinion, what's the best way to use InfraWorks? So I know we've got some of you who haven't used it, so based on what you've seen or learned about it, I guess we'll use that as the basis. But what do you see as the primary or optimum usage of the product? Is it aggregating GIS data, preliminary design, visualizing projects, communicating designs, or performing analysis? Let us know, in your opinion, what the best use of InfraWorks is. So far, about 50% have voted, so I'll leave the poll open for about another 10 seconds. Let a few more of you provide your answers. And there, we're up to about 70%. So I'm going to go ahead and close. I'll share the results with you. So the winner here was preliminary design, but close behind, visualizing projects completed in Civil 3D and also communicating designs internally. Low on the spectrum was aggregating GIS data. I actually find that a little surprising, and analyzing designs. So thanks for your input there. One more poll. What is your current usage level with InfraWorks? Let us know if you're using it, if you have it installed. Do you dabble in it? Do you regularly use it? Do you use it on every project? So we've got about 65% have voted so far. And the votes are still rolling in, so I'm going to give it just a few more seconds, and then I'll close the poll and share the results. All right, here goes. Closing and sharing. So 37% of the folks on this call currently don't have it installed. 26% installed it and played with it a bit. 24% have dabbled, and then down from there. So we've got a heavy contingent of Civil 3D users today, which is good. So let me hide that and get along our way here. I want to tell you guys about our civil engineering community site. This is a great central hub for all the different stuff that you might care about as far as InfraWorks and Civil 3D and our other products that have to do with civil engineering. Here you'll find links to the forums, idea stations where you can submit ideas about ways you'd like to see the product improved. Tips and tricks, the gallery where customers like you have submitted projects that they're working on, images, videos, 3D models, even VR. You can even post VR versions of projects that you're working on up in the gallery. Social hub, what are folks talking about with our products as far as Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing. Also videos, including a full library of the recordings of this webcast series. Like I said, we've been doing this for over 2 years, twice a month. You do the math. We've got a pretty extensive library of webcasts having to do with InfraWorks, Civil 3D, and even some other products as well. So definitely check that out whenever you get a chance. I don't believe that John's going to be talking about anything preview or labs today, but in the case that he is, just know that anything listed as preview or labs or something that our product team is working on but hasn't been released is just that, and there's no guarantee that it will be released until you actually see it in a fully supported version of the software. So don't make any purchasing decisions based on that kind of stuff. We encourage you to ask questions. Like I said, John's going to be our main presenter, but I'm going to be in the background answering questions to my best ability. And if anything particularly interesting or if there's a theme developing in the questions, I will interrupt John and we'll ask him out loud and have him provide the answer and maybe even demonstrate the answer a bit right there live during his presentation. So don't be shy about asking questions. Unfortunately, we can't open the phone lines to do them by audio. There are too many of you, but we encourage you to use the questions panel in the go-to interface to do so. So with that, I'm going to change presenters, turn the floor over to John Sayre. John, it's all yours.
All right.
And I am seeing your screen, and I'm seeing your screen and hearing you just fine.
All right. Eric, we've done this enough together that he knows exactly what I'm going to ask. That's a little weird. All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Again, my name is John Sayre. I'm a technical marketing manager here at Autodesk. A lot of the things I do, I support, generate assets so that the partners and our internal Autodesk technical people can use those to help convey, the message of how the software works, build data sets, videos, how-to things. We cover a lot of information. And part of that is helping Eric out here with these webinars. And Eric, thank you for asking me to come on today. I enjoy these webinars. If you've ever been on one of these with me, you know that I like to keep them loose. There's nothing, I like a little bit of action to happen. So what I mean by that is everything that you see here today is going to be done from scratch. I am not going to bake or pre-bake anything because I've been in production. I've been with the partner, the reseller. I've been obviously here with Autodesk, But I understand that, things don't go perfectly every single day. And I know that that amazes everybody here on this line, but things don't just go as they're supposed to. So I want the opportunity to have a mistake come up, because you're going to see that whenever you use it, because I see it and I use it every day. So I just like to, I'm going to have to turn the questions off. I see somebody said, woohoo, we get to see it crash. It's not going to crash. I'm knocking on wood here. It's not going to crash. But what I'm going to do is kind of dial it back just a little bit today. When Eric talked to me about showing how the grading features work, I always come back to somebody telling me that they're using Land Desktop and that they can grade a site faster than what I can with Civil 3D, because the grading tools just don't work in Civil 3D. Well, I think and I hope that after you see this today that you'll be able to agree with me that we are much better off with Civil 3D. And what we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on the feature line itself. We're going to use a grading object a little bit. We're also going to build a corridor from a feature line. And we're just going to do the things that we would do typically every single day. A lot of the questions that I've been getting have been just typical grading questions around feature lines. And I don't know that I've ever done a feature line class before, or a webinar. I keep saying class, but webinar. So that's where I wanted to start. There's a lot of things that the feature line does that folks just don't take advantage of. So I figured that's what I would do, is start right there with feature line. So I've got 3 different data sets here today that I'll be popping back and forth through. We are going to, I'm going to talk about what the feature line does and how you can use it. Spend just a little bit of time on that. Then we're going to grade a retaining wall here in this data set. We're then going to start from scratch, and I'm going to grade this entire parking area, all right, and building pad, and we'll talk about the detention pond back here. And then I'm going to jump over and talk about what we do at the end of a cul-de-sac or a hammerhead or a knuckle or whatever. They've got different names for these everywhere. So we'll talk about that also, because these are typical things that we have happen or have to put design on every single day. So we need to address that first, and maybe Eric will have me back and we can do a more advanced class later on. Because there's a lot more to talk about than what we're going to be able to go through here today in 45 minutes. So let's get started here. So first off, a couple things to remember about the feature line. I'm just going to go up and we're just going to start here. There's a couple, 3 different ways that we can build feature lines. We can build them from objects. We can build them just the feature line itself, piece at a time. We can build them from objects. We can build them from an alignment, all right? So a use case for building it from an alignment is if you had a alignment and profile that you were designing for an entrance, maybe, all right? So this entrance right here, this coming off this road, if you designed that with an alignment and profile, and then you wanted to be able to grade away from it, and you didn't want to build a corridor, you could actually have it generate a feature line from that alignment and profile. And yes, it would stay dynamic to that profile vertically and the alignment. You can also create feature lines from corridors. I mean, this has been something we've been talking about the last 3 releases of Civil 3D. Now you can actually break up the corridor even more. Since 2018's come out, we've got more functionality with that corridor. We could do a grading class just on the corridor itself and using feature lines with that. And then here you'll see you can create a feature line from step to offset. We also have other commands that come up whenever we generate the feature line, and we can actually get to that command there once we generate it. So let's start from scratch. I told you we were going to keep it simple today. I'm going to go ahead and select create a feature line. So the first thing you see here is you have to put it in a site. Now, if I hit my down arrow here, you can see that you have a site. I have a site for grading, a site 1, and I had none. All right, so we used to not be able to build a feature line unless it was in a site. Okay, I apologize if there's a little background noise. My air conditioner's coming on. It's a little warm here. So what does this mean? Why does it have to be in a site? Well, a site controls what that feature line interacts with, all right? So a new user to Civil 3D, that's the big problem they have when they start using feature lines, is they just don't quite understand why when they cross two feature lines that sometimes they have an issue, okay? I've seen crashing problems before, things of that nature in training classes, in problem data sets that folks have sent me for tech support before, and it all stemmed to the fact that they had two feature lines crossing and they were not the same elevation at that crossing point. As you all know, that there's not a software out there that uses the 10 method or the 10 method for generating a surface that likes a one point in the universe having two elevations, because it figures everything off of slope and length. That's what the 10 lines are. Well, if you've got the point and it's right on top of each other, what's the length of that triangle? Well, it's 0. Do that division until your calculator blows up and you'll never get it figured out. Well, the fact is that that's what happens a lot of times, is people mismanage these feature lines. And I'm not accusing, I'm saying I do it. Okay, I mismanage them sometimes out of being in a hurry or forgetting or something, and it will make your drawings become unstable. The best thing in the world that they did for us is they created this none site, all right? Now, what that means is you can create feature lines until you're blue in the face, and they can cross and they will not interact. They'll not only not interact with other feature lines in a none site, but they won't interact with alignments or parcels. Okay, if we have a site that we are dumping these feature lines in, then they're going to interact with any alignments or any parcels that are inside of that site. Okay, it's another great way to actually break things up if you're doing a layout using parcels and you wanted to throw a road across or something like that. You could actually break and split a lot with a feature line, because those will interact, the parcels and the feature lines will interact together, which is a great thing. But if you don't know why they're interacting, then it starts to maybe become a problem. So you can use the none site, and that takes care of the issue with them interacting and you not wanting them to. And sometimes we don't want them to interact, okay? Sometimes we want them just to be out there and we're referencing them, things of that nature. So there's times where we don't want them to interact. So that's a great way to do it, is just to either keep them separated in their own site. And if you've got two lines that cross or get close or you're worried about it, just put it in a separate site and they won't have any issues. Also, if you use that none site, it does the same thing. So I hope that explains why sites are very key with using feature lines. So we're going to drop down and we're going to tell it to use the current layer. We're not going to do that. Well, actually, I am going to do that. I always keep everything in that out-of-the-box layer, just because I'm kind of simple that way. So if I go up here and I go to See Topo Feature, that's the layer that we would probably use. So I'll go ahead and I'll hit Create a Feature Line again. We're going to go ahead and I can put it in a site, or I can actually put it in none. So we'll start out by putting it in none. I'm going to tell it to use the current layer because I've got my layer set. And I may build 30 or 40 of these feature lines to generate a surface. So I want them to be in the same layer so that when I'm done, so that nobody can mess with them, I'm going to turn them off. Okay, I'm not going to freeze them. I'm going to turn them off. So down here under conversion options, I can tell it if I'm creating something from an object, it'll give me the option to erase the existing entity. I don't recommend that because I always want that entity back. And if I erase it and then I turn everything off, then my parking lot goes away. All right, this is personal preference, but it's just a rule of thumb with me. So I can select Erase Existing Entities. I can go ahead and tell it to assign elevations. So I don't have to key in every elevation. You're going to see that today. And I can tell it to weed points. So if it's pulling elevations across the surface and I've got tons of points on that feature line, I can tell it to weed those down for me. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I'm just going to start drawing a feature line. This is the same way you would draw just a polyline. So if I pick a point, it asks me for an elevation. Now, I don't have to give it an elevation, but I always like to. All right, so if I don't know that elevation there on that surface, I can just hit S, and it'll pull that from any surface that I have. Okay, I only have EG there, so my existing ground. So I'm going to have it pull that elevation. We also can start to think about relative elevations to a surface. So what I mean by that, and I'm going to show you here in just a second with a retaining wall, I can tell it if I want it to be a foot higher than that surface, it will pull that feature line up automatically and leave that feature line at the elevation, whatever elevation I set it higher. So it's going to read the surface, and I can tell it I want it to be a foot higher than that surface. So the elevation at each point will be relative to the surface, just a foot higher. All right. Now, what happens when the surface updates? Guess what? The relative elevation automatically updates. So all of that is dynamic, and it's getting updated, and it just makes grading a lot easier. We're going to use this relative information here in a minute. I'm just going to hit OK to specify the next point. So if I pick the next point, you've got some options down here. I can set this point and set the elevation on it by slope. So I can say I want to go from this point to this point at a 2% grade. All right? And it'll set the elevation at the end there for me. I can actually give it an elevation. I can just hit E for elevation, and I can key in the elevation at that point. You can see here I can give it a difference. What that means is I can say, I want you to raise that a half a foot from this elevation that I started at. So it's a difference of, say, 0.5, and it would set the elevation at that point, at that elevation. The one that I think people miss and don't use very much, and it might just be because the other ones work so well, but it's transition, all right? I have this feature line is going to end up on the north side of this property somewhere, and I started here with an elevation. I'm going to tell it I want it to transition, all right? I'm going to pick my next point, and I'm going to hit enter for transition, and I'm going to pick my next point here, all right? I'm going to hit enter for transition, and I'll just come back, and I'll say I'm going to set that. I'm going to set that to a specific elevation. So I'm going to tell it right here to pull it from a surface, and I'll go ahead and hit select, and I'll pick my surface UG, and it sets that elevation. It wants me to go ahead and accept it. I hit enter, and I hit enter. Now, I did not set an elevation here, here, or here. All right, so let's look at what it did transition-wise. All right, so I'm going to select that feature line, right-click, and go down to Elevation Editor. This is a great, great tool. And notice what it did. It set the initial elevation. It set the end elevation, and it interpolated at a consistent grade through to that next point. Folks, if you're doing curb returns and things of that nature, sometimes feature lines are the way to go. Any kind of transition that you're doing for lock grading, hey, it's great to not have to figure the slope from point to point. You just use a feature line, tell it to transition, and it sets that consistent slope for you. We're going to use that today, too, whenever we grade the parking area. So very quickly here, if you want to edit this feature line, I have full editability here in the elevation editor. I can pick in here and I can set different elevations. I can add additional PVI points or insert elevation points. So if I wanted to set an elevation point here, I could do that and then set it to an elevation of my choice. Notice it does give that to you in a little bit different marker here on the left. All right, so if I select 0, it's going to show me that's the 0 station on that feature line. I select the next point. That's not a point we had before. That's one that we set, and it shows you that it is different. All right, we can change this by grade. So if I want to go from 0, 0 to 5937, instead of negative 1.5, I want to go up at 2%. Well, it sets the next grade for me, and it gives me the grade ahead to the next point. All right. So we have a ton of leeway here in how we can actually set all of this up. We can, again, set this relative to a surface, all right? So we can tell it, I want you to be relative to EG, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I can raise the entire feature line up a specific increment, all right? We all know that when we start to grade, nothing is an even increment, right? I mean, it never happens that you hit it on an even foot. I want to raise that 1 foot. It's usually, I want to raise that 0.329 feet, all right? Well, we can do that, and it does it automatically. Everything that's being graded off that feature line also gets updated. So it's not as if you're doing it and then you've got to go back and update a bunch of surfaces. You can physically watch your surface move up and down. So that's about all the time I want to spend on just what the feature line is, how it works, and the editing tools that you have, because we're going to get into this and we're going to start talking about it in a real world context. So I see there's lots of questions there, Eric. I'm going to take 10 seconds here and ask if there's any that you want me to try and answer, or you're taking care of them pretty well, I think.
There was
I can see that you're
there was one that I wanted to throw out there. Can you move feature lines between sites, or can you move it from the none site to a site, or vice versa?
Absolutely you can. And if I select that feature line, remember I had that in a none site. I can right-click on that feature line and I can drop down to either move to site or copy to a new site. So I can move it to a site and it tells me the destination site that I have. So remember, I had site 1, which is pretty typical in everybody's, in a lot of people's templates. And I have that grading site. So I can move it to that grading site and hit OK. And now if I run a list on it, instead of being in a none site, you can see that it's in the grading site. So absolutely you can. Another thing that I showed you there is that you can actually copy that to another site. So if you don't want to lose the design that you have on that feature line and you want to try and use it in a different way, or maybe run scenario 2 of your grading, you can actually copy that to another site, turn off, or that way whenever you're using the feature lines, you move them up and down, maybe you end up crossing them, they're not interacting, and you're good to go. So all right, I'm going to move on because I've got 33 minutes here, and I told Eric I would end about 2 minutes early, so I've got a lot to do in 33 minutes. So the first scenario I wanted to talk about is a retaining wall. Folks, I can't tell you how many times I've had a site where I've graded to daylight from a feature line, all right, using the grading tools, and then figured out, you know what, we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to have to put a retaining wall on here. Well, now inside of Civil 3D, the retaining walls work very well with a corridor, all right, because we've got the corridor bow ties that are fixed. I'm going to show you that here in just a second, how to fix one. But we've got those we're able to fix the bow ties in the corridors. It's a great tool. So it makes the design look really tight. And the fact that we can actually build a corridor from a feature line, which is something that folks have been asking for forever. All right, and I applaud the product team for doing that, because it just gives us a whole lot more leeway here in our design. So what you see here, there's a finished grade surface, all right, that I've got on this parking lot, just as a scenario, and I've got a couple of feature lines. This one's representing the back of curb, actually the edge of the asphalt, and I've got a line here that I was referencing and just showing it as the curb. I'm going to offset that a foot, okay? Because I'm at this point, I'm just trying to look and see if I want to use a retaining wall or not. So I would actually just select that feature line, because I don't want to use this one. It's too close for this particular design. So I would select that, and you can see all the tools that you have here for feature lines. So if I go up here to edit geometry, folks, you'll live here. This is a great area inside of this, inside of the ribbon. I want to select the offset command, create a feature line from step to offset. So I'm going to go a distance of 1 foot to this side, and I'm going to do a difference of 0. What that did was give me a feature line that's a foot away from the other feature line, all right? Now you can see that it goes up and it comes around and it ties back in over here, all right? So now what I want to do is create a corridor from that feature line. Now I have an assembly that's out here, and it's just an assembly with a retaining wall subassembly on it, all right? So I'm going to go up to corridor, and I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call it retaining wall, if I can spell. All right. I'm just going to leave it a basic style. We're not worried about look and feel today. I'm going to go ahead and select feature line, and I don't know if that feature line's been named. I don't know what site it's in. I don't know anything about it. I know I just offset it, so I don't want to have to go through hunting for it. So I'm going to select my select from drawing button, and I'll be able just to pick that feature line. Now what it's going to do is it's going to ask me to name it, all right? It just keeps it straight. It helps it with the corridor, and it helps you to name these things. So we'll call it something after we click in there, retaining wall. I'll hit OK, and the corridor dialog box will come back up. Now, I need to give it an assembly to run down that feature line, so we'll use our retaining wall assembly, and I want it to daylight to my EG surface. I'm just going to go ahead and take off set baseline or region parameters. I don't need to do that at this juncture. It's going to set it up automatically. I hit OK, and voila, we have our elevation, or our retaining wall. Now, something I am going to do real quick is I'm going to set up the frequency on this retaining wall. So I'm going to edit my frequency in here, and I'm going to tell it I want it to be 5 foot along tangents, and I don't have any curves. So I hit OK, and it tightens up my frequency. All right. Notice that we do have the bow ties, and I'll take care of those in just a second. But what I want you to see is that now that is daylighting to something that it shouldn't be. So let's look at that real quick. I told you there would be things that we missed. So let me select that, and I will go to the corridor properties, and we'll make sure it's set up and targeting the way it should be. EG is the left. That should be correct. And slope or elevation, that's going to be the height of the wall or the actual top of the wall. I can control that differently. Let's rebuild it and see what happens. Maybe look at the feature line. Aha! See that? That's a problem when your feature line is set to 0. So I can quickly re-offset that feature line. All right, I did something different. So the offset distance is a foot. I pick the side, and I want to do a difference. So D, elevation difference is 0. All right, reset it, and let's look at it again. The elevation editor. Grab it, go to elevation editor, and it still has zeros. Let's look at the original. Yep, that's a good reason why that's not working. So let's do this. Let's grab that feature line, and it has elevations on it. All right, we'll just do an offset real quick. We could do it for the curve, or we could do it for the retaining wall. We'll go 1.5 foot, 1.5. I'm going to specify this side, and I'm going to do a difference of 0. There's our feature line, and it does have elevation, so we are golden now. So very quickly, I'm going to go back and recreate this corridor. We'll do it from a feature line, and I will select that feature line again. And I'll pick it, and I'll call it retain. Hit OK. And we'll run that same assembly, and I bet you we get a little bit better product this time. Yep, I can tell right now that it's a lot better. All right, and I will go ahead and I will turn it on its side here so that you can see what it's done. All right, so I can see that retaining wall, and I can see that it's following, getting taller as it goes. So what can we do here? I'm going to grab that corridor, and we'll again modify the region. So I'm going to edit the frequencies and pick inside of it. I'm in a 3D view, so it's going to be hard to do. So let's get back to something that we can look at here. So I'm going to go back to my frequencies, edit frequency, pick, and say that it's 1 foot, or no, not 1 foot, 5 foot, and hit OK. Now the frequencies are better, and I can see that it adds those in right there. Now, why would I use it? Well, number one, the feature line is setting and controlling this this retaining wall, which makes it a little bit easier than trying to use an alignment and profile, because we can grip edit any of that feature line and edit that back and forth, move it, whatever, and the corridor will follow. What I want to show you is that this can be, it's actually attached there at the surface itself. So I can grab that feature line now. In a 3D view, it's going to be just a little bit difficult. I'm going to go send that to the back. Then I can grab that feature line it's generated from. I can right-click on that, and I can look at it inside of my elevation editor. All right, now I want that to be, I want the top of the retaining wall to be a foot higher than my finished grade surface. Okay, so what I need to do right out of the gate is tell it I want it to be relative to my FG surface. All right, and then you get another column here of elevation relative. This is the elevation that it's going to be moving up. So you also get a column that says elevation derived from. This is an absolute elevation. We want to select all of this and tell it to be relative to a surface, and then we want to give it how high it's relative. So I can select all of the stations and tell it I want it to be a foot higher, and notice that top of wall came up. Now, how can I prove that? Well, I can simply change to conceptual here, and you can see that the retaining wall is now higher, a foot higher than my surface, right? So if I want to change that again, then I can actually grab, I'm probably going to have to send this to the back again. I can grab that feature line, maybe, and I can go back into my elevation editor, and I can say, you know what, well, number one, I can change these individually. I don't have to make it relative at each point. So at that particular juncture right there, or point, let's see where we're at on the wall. Let's go back here, here. That should be this elevation here. I can actually make it relative 2 feet. And notice it comes up automatically. All right? I can go back to 1. Notice it's adjusting that wall up and down. Let me turn off this view. Let me go back to 2D wireframe. Watch your footings here. So if I make that 2, it's adjusting the footing width also. I can make it 3. All right? It's moving it up and down. We'd have to rebuild the corridor in order for it to read daylight. But once that's done, or we could actually tell it right here that we want the corridor to be rebuilt automatic, or we can hit the wrong button there. Hold on just a second. Let's go back. Don't get into your corridor editor because it makes several viewports. So we can just set this to be rebuild automatic, and then that footing will stay pinned, all right, and it will adjust. Let me go back to it, and we'll go back here to make that 2 feet, and notice that it stays, the footing stays. They get wider according to the height, and we're still relative at that point, all right. So I don't know how many times, like I said, I've generated a corridor, or I've generated a retaining wall, and I've had to adjust the up, just a point on the retaining wall, and it was a little bit of a booger because I had to set it with feature lines, the top width, and then set the bottom, and it was kind of a mind scramble to keep in check. This makes it very, very easy. All right. So let me go back to the plan view. And we're gonna select the corridor itself. We're gonna get rid of this bow tie, so I can clear a corridor bow tie. So I can pick here, all right, and the incoming and outgoing tangents. So I'm gonna tell it I want to fix it here, and notice it resolves that bow tie. We can do the same thing here, all right. You may need to adjust your frequencies just a little bit, but we'll go ahead and we will clear that bow tie here. And I'm going to make that come out just a little bit more, and it clears it. So we would give it some adjustment on the frequencies, maybe break it down to 2-foot increments, and it would come around this exactly the way that we want. So being able to clear the bow ties, great thing. Being able to build a retaining wall with a feature line and then generate the corridor from it, fantastic. It's just a good tool. Now, I said it was relative to the surface. All right, so if I was to take this and put this up here so that you can see it, and then I just simply grab, let me rebuild this. What I'll do is I'll just add an elevation to the FG surface, the entire surface. I'll go down to edits, and I'll say I want to raise that surface. Let's raise it 0.33. Notice that the retaining wall elevation moved up, all right? The whole surface moved up 4 inches, but it also took into account for the top of the retaining wall. All right. So it's updating your cross-section sheets. If you've got cross-sections of the retaining wall, it's updating all of that at one time. So really great way to use the feature lines. Obviously, you want to be sure that this pipe is underneath the retaining wall, but we take into account for that later. So that's just one real-world feature of being able to use those. I'm going to go ahead and jump to my next item here.
Got a couple of questions I'd like to throw at you, John, while you're switching.
Sure.
Here. One question was, can you move multiple feature lines from site to site, or can it only be done one at a time?
No, you can select as many as you want and move them.
Okay. And can you, so the bow tie, clearing the bow ties obviously is a corridor application, but is there one for grading objects as well, or does that handle itself?
No, there's not one for grading objects. The grading object itself has been enhanced, so it is much better on the bow tie situation in 2018. It's actually got better even in 2017. So it does its own bow tie fixing.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
I think that yeah, it does. And I think that there are some scenarios where it might still leave a bow tie, but I'd say probably 90% of what's out there it does fix. Now it also, if you have two grading objects that run into each other, it will fix that now. All right, so used to they would just overlap and look all wonky. Well, now they'll actually interact. If they're in the same site, they will interact and try to grade together. So that's a pretty big deal.
So we got some additional information coming in on moving the feature lines. It appears that maybe you can only move feature lines from one site to another if they all exist on the same site to begin with. So in other words, if you had 3 different feature lines on 3 different sites, you couldn't move them to one common site apparently. So
okay. I was assuming that you meant you said one site to another.
Yeah. Well, this is a hot topic in the questions panel. There's a lot of discussion going on about it, so I just wanted to share with everybody.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I was answering that as if they were going from site to site, not 3 or 4 different sites to one. You would have to move those individually. Right. So if you had 10 feature lines that were in 4 different sites, you would have to, you could grab the ones that are in the same site, if there was 3 or 4 of them, and move them to another site. But then if you had, if the other 7 or whatever, they were in different sites, you'd have to move those individually.
Gotcha. To
whatever site you wanted to move them to. Sorry, I should have been more clear on that. I apologize.
We forgive you, John.
That's all right. Oh, well, I mean, I thank you. Anything else?
I think that's it for now.
I'm going to have to book it here.
Yeah.
I wanted to show how I would grade this parking lot, and I'm going to be able to grade some of it. We will just see how far I can get. I want to be able to grade this pond with the grading object and then show you how to pull a stage storage chart, because I think that's a huge thing. We may go over just a little bit. So the methodology and the way that I would grade this site is this entrance here is controlling, and this entrance here is controlling. So I need to build a feature line coming in this direction and a feature line coming off of here that will give me my base, all right? And then everything else I can do by slope if I want to, and that gives me a great start on my grading. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to create a feature line, and we're going to put this in the grading site because I'm going to bring all this together. So we're good to go here. I'll go ahead and select my starting point. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to pull that from the surface. So pull it from EG, that's existing, all right? And then I'll go ahead and I will snap to this point at the edge of pavement and pull that from the surface also, because we're not going to tear that cross slope out, all right? Now, I'm going to set some intermediate points and just kind of do this by grade. So I can do this with transition just to look at what it sets for me and see how I'm laying. So I'm going to go ahead and just snap to right here, and we'll use the transition command. And then I'm going to come across and stop right here around where the building pad would be. I'll set a point there, and I'll go ahead and say transition, but we're gonna go back and reset that. Come to here, set a point for transition, and then I'll just set a point here at the end, and we'll say transition. All right. It's going to ask me for an elevation. All right. And I'm going to give it an elevation. Let's just go ahead and give it the surface elevation at that point. Now we're going to modify this because I know that that didn't come in exactly the way I want, and I'm going to actually add another point here to transition back up. So if I go to my elevation editor and I start to look, right, 1448, I come into the next station, 1447.31. I come to this point, it's at 1436. I start to look at grade. So I'm only at 1.04%, which I'm good with that. That's a good slope for a parking lot. But then from there, I kind of know what elevation I want to set my pad at just by looking, so I can do this arbitrarily. All right, so I can set that there. We're still at under, you know, we're meeting all the grading requirements of being under 5% for this particular job. I'll set this elevation on this side at the same, all right, so that I'm kind of flat across there in the beginning. And then I'm going to go up from this point at 0.5, you know what, we can go up 1. We'll go up 1% and set that elevation at that point right there, all right? So I have my control going across. Now, one thing I did not do was I did not set a point here, all right? So I don't know what that elevation is, so I'm going to go back in and I'm going to set another elevation point right here, all right? And I'll just, it's 1444 because that's flat across there. I'll hit OK, and I've set my intermediate point. I'm good to go. Now I'm going to set the control coming in from the north down and tying in here. You'll see why I'm doing this here in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and create a feature line. And same thing, it's going to be in grading. I'll hit OK, and I'm going to start here at this end because I know the elevation, 1444. All right, now I'm going to follow this line, all right, and we're going to just use a transition, all right. Now I can also have it follow an arc, so I can hit A, and I can have it follow an arc around that center line right there, and I can tell it to transition, then go back to adding a line. I'll go ahead and I'll select a point here and do a transition, and then I'm going to set a point here, all right, and that's the end of where it's going to start to figure the transition, so I can tell it I want to pull that from a surface if I don't have my label there, and I can pull that. I'm done. All right? So let's look at what it did. I can go into the elevation editor, and you can see that I'm at a constant slope of negative 3.35. That's plenty good for what I want to do. Okay? That's definitely within requirements. If you don't like that, then you can start to tweak these up and down and retransition those in between. I say retransition, you'd have to do it here in this panorama. Now, so I've got my control this way, so everything down here I can grade from this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab that feature line, and I'm going to do what's called a stepped offset. So I'm going to grab this selection here in the ribbon. Once I select my, let me show you that again. Once I select my feature line, you get these commands for the feature lines. So I'm going to hit create a stepped offset. So it's asking me for a distance. Well, I don't know what the distance is from here to back beyond this parking area. So I'm just going to select, I'm going to pick right here, and I'm going to just pull it down and set a point there. All right, and it pulls the distance for me. I'll pick this side, and what I want to do is grade away from that feature line down. You know what? I picked the wrong point. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to grade away down to a point here at the back of the building because I want to set that first. Let's go a distance from here to, say, here, and we'll pick this side, and I'm going to grade that direction at negative 0.5. So we'll just drop it 0.5% to that point, and it sets all of the elevations on this feature line according to this elevation at 0.5% lower. All right? So let's do that again. Let's grab this feature line. I want to go 1% down because there's a pond down here. It's going to collect all the water. So I'm going to go ahead and hit select stepped offset, and I'll go from a distance of that feature line right there straight down to, say, here. I'll pick this side, and I'm going to grade at a negative 1. I want it to go down at 1%. So I set that line. I'm good to go. All right? Everybody's like, well, there's only 3 or 4 feature lines. What do you mean you're good to go? I'm almost done, and I'm almost ready to show you how we can put this together. So this particular feature line here, I want to grade this back this direction, say at 0.75%, so that all of this is flowing back to this road or flowing in this direction in some way, shape, or form. All right? Because I can start to put inlets in after I've got it graded, things of that nature, to start to catch this water. So if I grab that feature line right there and I want to do an offset, I can say I want to do an offset from here to, say, it doesn't matter. I can do it all the way out here. All right? And I can say I want to go up at a grade of 0.75. If you want to go up, it's a positive. If you want to go down, it's a negative. So I set that out there to the left. Now, in order to get a surface over here, I need to set elevation on this line. All right? So I can go back and reference this elevation point right here just by clicking through and looking. So this particular elevation is 1446.80. All right, now we could snap to that, and you might get the elevation, you might not. I always just go back and set it. It's very easy to set. Plus, it keeps me in tune with how I'm grading. So I'm going to get the elevation on the other end, and guess what? We're going to do a transition between them. So let me pull this down. So that's the end of the line, and it's 1454.93. All right, so that's going to be our beginning and ending elevation. So let's throw another feature line on real quick. So let's go to feature line, create a feature line, hit OK. We'll start here. And we're going to input the elevation at 1446.80. All right. We're going to go to this endpoint here. All right. And we're going to use a transition. Then we're going to go around this arc here to that point. Oh, I picked the wrong one. When you do that, just hit enter and then hit undo, and it'll go back to the previous point. So I'm going to go ahead and select the right point this time. We'll do a transition. And I'm going to go back to using a line, and we'll snap to this line. All right. And we'll go ahead and set that elevation. All right. And that elevation was 1454.93. We're good. So if I look at that, the elevation editor, you can see that it gave me a good slope. Now I've got, for the first 100 feet there, it went at 0%. Or actually, no, we're good to go. It's at 0 for a little ways. I don't care about that. That's fine in this particular instance. If I don't like that, I can come back here and set that at, say, 1%, and you can see how that grade adjusts. So I can tweak it just a little bit if it did something that I didn't like. So we'll leave it at that. That's a pretty good grade we did. Let me look at that one more time. Elevation editor. Go up at 1%. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Now, I need to get a surface on this side, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to offset that. All right? I'm going to go from here and just set a point out here, and I'll pick the side it's going to offset to, and we will do a grade again, and we'll just go up at 1%, and it sets that line. Now, very quickly, I don't know what we've been working on this for maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes, and that's even with making a few mistakes. I can create a surface now out of these feature lines. So if I look at this, and we may have to adjust a couple things once we create this surface, but I can say this is going to be my FG, I'll call it FG stick, all right? And I'll grab that feature line, and we can right-click and hit select similar, and it'll grab all of them. Now, it grabbed my pond, so I can hold my shift key down and select it again, and it'll deselect that feature line. So always remember that. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to add to surface as a break line. I'll pick my FG stick surface and just hit OK, and I have my slope. All right, you can see, I'll turn off my existing ground surface so that you can see it a little better. And I have a surface that I can grab now, and it covers everything. So when I say covers everything, I can grab that line right there. I can grab this. These are my islands, all right? I can just go in, grab all of these. I can grab that line. I can grab this. It's a lot of fun setting these elevations on these islands, right? Lots of fun. So I can grab that, and I can go back to feature line and say I want to create a feature line from objects, all right? So it's going to go in the default layer. I'm going to have it assign elevations on all of that from my FG stick surface. That's the surface I just generated. All of those are set, okay? Now, let's see if we missed one. I'm going to select similar, and I'll just grab them all. I'm going to go ahead and go to my object viewer and just take a look, and it looks like I got them all. So it's all set up that fast. All right. Now, what about the islands? Okay. Number one, this is not the surface that I want to use for everything. I want to use the surface that I just generated from all these islands and everything. So I can physically just erase that FG stick surface. All right. And I can get rid of these feature lines. I can the feature lines that I used for control, I can actually grab them and I can get rid of them. I'm going to leave this one because I want to use it because these were hard control. Now, I'm going to generate a brand new surface because we can do that. Just call it FG, hit OK, and then I'm going to grab all of these by selecting one and hitting select similar and then deselecting the pond, and I'm going to add those to that FG surface as break lines, and now I have a surface inside. Now, that represents my parking, but it's not taking into account for these particular areas here where the islands are. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select one of these, and I'm going to do an offset, all right? And I'm going to offset, you can offset this whatever. I've seen people use a half a foot. I've seen people use a foot. We're just going to use just a half a foot for today. And I'm going to pick inside, and I want to say I want to go a difference of 0.5, all right? And it's going to raise that particular feature line, so now I have an island. I can do the same thing for these. I can pick the distance is 0.5. I can pick inside. Actually, you know what? Instead of doing these one at a time, I can grab that feature line. I can go back to step offset, and I can say I want to go up 0.5, and I want to do multiple feature lines. So I'm going to pick the offset side, and I may have just led you astray. We're only going to have the one. So I'll just do an elevation difference of 0.5. Let's see what it does here. Elevation difference of I was thinking of something different. So we would have to actually offset these one at a time. So I'll go with distance, pick the offset side and a half a foot, select this island, same thing, half a foot, pick inside of the island and do a difference of half a foot. Let's do one big one here, and then we're going to add those to the surface so you can see it. So a half a foot, pick inside. All right. Now, let's add those that we just offset to the inside. Let's add those to our surface. I've got this one here too. So we'll be able to see this in 3D. So I'm going to add that to the surface as a break line, hit OK and OK. And now you can see the contours themselves actually look different. All right. They take into account for that step. So if I look at this, I can actually see my islands that I've set, and I can see the ones that I haven't, or I can't see the ones that I haven't. So again, I have a line on the outside that I can grab and use a grading object to daylight from. I can also use the daylighting tools on this pond. Now, just for sake of time, Eric, we may go a couple minutes over here. I'm going to grade this pond real quick because I want to show that stage storage chart. But very quickly, we're able to get a grading plan with our design intent just from a couple, 3 or 4, maybe 5 feature lines, and then start to stick the islands to them so that the grading looks correct. and that the design engineer doesn't go, well, why doesn't that look like it's going through the island and this and that. It's very, very quick to do. You can almost do it right in front of them. And then they can make design changes right there with you. That's what ends up happening is they see how fast it is. They say, well, maybe that's not where I want to be. I want to raise that. Can you do that? Absolutely. So it makes that very, very quick. So one last thing. I want to grade the inside of this pond, and I want to show you how to pull a stage storage chart because, you know, the stage storage chart is something that engineers use all the time for detention design. If I go up to grading and I go to grading creation tools, I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to call this pond. Actually, I'm going to build a new one. Actually, it's asking me for a site. I need to create a new site. We have one. I'll just stick it in site 1 for right now. We'll give it a new group name. We'll call this pond. All right, and we'll hit OK. It's going to generate a surface called pond. We're good to go. I hit OK. I'm going to tell it I want to grade inside of this down relative, and I believe this feature line, if I remember right, has slope on it. It's all one elevation, so we'll just go down a specific distance. So I'm going to go grade to a distance, and I'll say I want to create grading. Pick here. It's not in the group. This is something that happens. You forget which group this is in. So here's where we can move this site, or move to site. Say I want to go to site 1, hit OK, and now when we hit this, we should be able to grade to it. I'll select inside. I want to go the whole length. The distance that I want to go, let's just say 4 feet deep. All right, and I want to go at a slope of, say, 3 to 1. All right, and hit escape, and I've got my grading down. Now let's look and see. Let's go to Object Viewer, and that may have graded that up instead of down. So you got to say -3 to 1. All right, so we can edit that right here and say the same distance. Let's go 5 so you can see a change, and do a slope of -3, and that will be inside. Then we want to give it an infill. All right, pick the inside. We're good to go. Now, I don't see any contours. All right, so I make sure that my pond was generated. All right, and then I can go back to the surface properties, and I've got my, for some reason, I've got my contours. Oh, there's just not that many contours. Let's do this. Let's make the depth of that pond. Let's specify a distance. That's only 5 feet, so it's not really that far. If I want it to be 4 feet deep, I need to go 12 feet. So let's go 12 and 3 to 1, and now that gives me the right number. So I just want to pull. I want to know what the volume of that pond is. So if I go up to Analyze and I select Stage Storage, it allows me to define this space, and I can define it from an entity, or I can actually manually enter contours. But I'm going to define it from surface contours, and I just pick that right there, and here's my volumes. Okay. Now, why is this a big deal? Because anybody designing stormwater, it's so fast to generate that we can get the volume. Well, now if we don't have the right volume that we need, and we need to adjust that pond, we could actually insert this here, then hit cancel, and it would insert my table. And if that pond needed to grow, I can physically go in here, and I have to send this to the back. I can grab that feature line, and I can start to move this, okay? So I can make it bigger, right? Okay, so it's all regenerated. I got that a little bit bigger. I can go back, pull my stage storage chart again, and hit define, select the contours, and here's my new stage storage chart, and I can insert that right here, and you can see that the volumes are different, okay, 48, 846, and 5622. All right, you can see that these are different. That is super fast compared to how somebody that's just listing contours and getting areas and then averaging between and all of that. Super fast tool to use to gather information about those detention ponds. So Eric, we're 5 minutes over. Sorry about that.
That's right.
got a little long-winded there, so we'll go ahead and take questions. I apologize we didn't get to the cul-de-sac, but I think we're out of time.
I do have one question that came up quite a few times is we've got some very smart and experienced graders on the call, so they were wondering why in some cases you used feature lines when you could have used grading objects and maybe corridors. So I know that it's preference, and I know that grading is, I've said this many times, grading is as much an art as a science. But in your case, you know, why did you, when you were offsetting across the parking lot, I mean, why did you use the offset there and not the grading object, for example?
Well, because I wanted to, well, number one, I didn't set an elevation, period. I did not figure one elevation on any of that grading. I started with what was existing at the edge of pavement or where I was tying in at those two entrances, and I used design slopes to generate the feature lines and built the minimum amount of feature lines so that I could offset and set grade from the offset feature lines that I generated. To me, that's a much, well, it's a quicker way, in my opinion, to do it than to try and figure out how to generate this with a corridor, okay? And that's why I use feature lines here. I find that there's, you've got more design functionality with the feature line, so I can adjust any of these feature lines at any point, and it updates my model. That's why I like to use the feature lines. It all comes down to, I don't know, I don't want to say getting out of your comfort zone, but you're used to doing it one way. Is one way better than another? You know, that is personal preference. I like to use the feature lines because of what I just said. I can control, this was control coming in, this was control coming in. So once these two lines were set, it's just a matter of offsetting them to get a consistent slope across this parking here and here relative to my control lines. And I was just concerned with getting the water from this point down to the pond. So there are other design considerations on sites that you have to take into account for. Will this work for every single one? Maybe, maybe not, but it'll work for a lot of them because it's how I grade things. If I've got a data set that I'm building, it's a lot easier to offset and generate like a plane surface and then stick these outside edges or the actual, like this feature line here, just tell it to stick to that particular surface because the surface is representative of how I want it to slope. So that's why I do it. I can set those very, very quickly. Did that answer the question?
I believe so, and I know one thing that I was thinking of, that the feature lines are nice because they're really easy to add to a surface. So if you're planning to build a surface out of what you're drawing, then you know just select right-click, add to surface. That's a lot simpler than kind of what you have to go through with different grading objects, you know, and having a grading group and making a surface out of that and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's definitely, there's definitely more than one way to do this.
Oh yeah, and I would definitely grade away from this line to daylight with a grading object. Mm-hmm. And then what I would do is generate a surface and paste those two surfaces in. Then I have a surface that represents the entirety. So if I modify anything, it updates its respective surface, which updates the overall surface. That sounds like it's extra work, but it takes 30 seconds to generate a surface and paste the two in, and then you've got an overall representation of what you want. Yep. The fact that it's so fast to iterate, that's where the feature lines become very, very powerful.
Well, as you mentioned, we are over time. There are more questions. We had a lot of really great questions, so maybe you and I can follow up with those after the webcast. We've got them all captured, and we'll download the log afterwards, and maybe email some of you folks directly with answers. I'm going to take back the screen just momentarily,
sure,
so that I can just remind everybody that we've got our next webcast coming up on August 23rd from 12 to 1, same time. 2 weeks from now, the topic will be rail design with InfraWorks and Civil 3D. So please join us for that webcast in 2 weeks. John, thanks for a great presentation. You packed a ton of information into a short time. I'm definitely going to take you up on having you back to at least talk about maybe cul-de-sacs and some other stuff that you brought up And there were other ideas that people brought up even while you were talking in the questions panel that, that they'd like to see covered as well. So hope to have you back in the future.
Absolutely. I thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for attending today, and hopefully we'll see you all and then some again in 2 weeks for our next webcast. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.